Bhutan's Himalayan valleys are heavily romanticized as the ultimate untouched sanctuary, but visiting them requires navigating a highly regulated system. You pay a mandatory daily sustainable development fee, and you cannot explore independently. A licensed guide must accompany you everywhere. Because the financial and logistical costs are exceptionally steep, picking the right time for your trip is the single most critical decision you will make. This quadrant chart plots the logistical and financial effort required for a trip against the cultural impact you get in return. We are looking specifically at the heavily marketed February to March window in the Punakha and Phobjikha valleys. Backpacking through Southeast Asia sits down here in the low-effort variable impact zone, but Bhutan in late winter and early spring operates at the absolute maximum threshold for both cost and cultural density. So we are skipping the standard travel vlog format. We are going to run a strict return on investment analysis on this specific itinerary. Before you commit to the peak cultural season, you need to know the exact friction you are buying into and whether it matches your travel style. We start with the environmental realities, looking first at the high-altitude geography of the Phobjikha Valley. The primary biological return on your investment here is timing. Arrive in February and you catch the tail end of the endangered black-necked crane migration before the birds return to Tibet. To understand what that timing costs you, look at this graph. It tracks the 12-month average rainfall in bars against the temperature ranges in lines. The summer monsoon from June to August dumps massive rain, which regularly floods mountain roads and drops visibility to near zero. Traveling in the January and February shoulder-to-peak zone guarantees almost zero rain. However, the gap between the high and low temperature lines is extreme, with morning temperatures dropping close to freezing. You get dry, accessible roads and exclusive wildlife viewing, but you pay for it by packing for brutal morning cold and shedding layers during wide afternoon temperature swings. The cultural epicenter of the spring season is Punakha Drupchen, the ancient winter capital. Arriving early in the season grants you access to the Punakha Drupchen. Here, local militia reenact a 17th century victory over Tibetan invaders in the courtyard. That immediately transitions into the Punakha Sechu, 3 days of highly symbolic, protective mask dances performed by the monks. The absolute pinnacle of this circuit is the pre-dawn unveiling of an 83-foot-tall thongdrel tapestry. It is displayed for a few hours and rolled away before direct sunlight can degrade the silk. Accessing these deeply authentic moments involves heavy logistical friction. You must book months in advance, navigate peak crowds, and commit to mandatory pre-dawn wake-ups. Witnessing these events requires completely surrendering your personal schedule to the rigid timeline of the festival calendar. Navigating between these major sites requires moving through the wider valley infrastructure on foot, which often means crossing traditional suspension bridges over the main rivers. This brings you to mandatory, highly contextualized pilgrimage sites like Chimi Lakong. You need a guide to decode the unorthodox history of Drukpa Kyunli, the divine madman whose teachings define the temple's rituals. Entering these sacred spaces involves a strict, non-negotiable checklist for site access. The physical dress code is rigidly enforced. You must remove your shoes before entering, and you must wear long sleeves and full-length trousers regardless of the afternoon heat. Operationally, absolutely no interior photography is permitted, and you must remain under direct guide supervision the entire time. You gain access to active, living spiritual sites, but the direct trade-off is the total loss of independent, spontaneous exploration. It is easy to view these ancient wooden songs purely as idyllic, peaceful retreats. In reality, they sit in active environmental hazard zones, managed constantly by the local Dzongkhag administration. This table breaks down the disparity between what tourists perceive and what the government actually has to manage. What you see as a scenic river is actually active Glaf zonation, glacial lake outburst floods. The fixed tourist routes you are required to walk are deliberately aligned with safe evacuation zones and early warning systems. The ancient wooden temples are massive winter fire risks, outfitted under the surface with high-pressure structural fire protocols and modern hydrants. Mandatory guides and strict itineraries serve a sophisticated disaster management protocol. They exist for literal survival, ensuring tourists stay safe in a volatile landscape. A February to March trip to Punakha is a premium, high-friction investment. You are paying top dollar to surrender your logistical control. This decision tree maps your priorities. First, will you sacrifice flexibility for peak events? If no, budget optimizers and independent wanderers should target May, November, or other countries. If yes, target January for wildlife or February for dense festivals. If you are a true cultural optimizer, enduring the daily fees, the freezing mornings, and the strict compliance yields a highly orchestrated immersion into Bhutanese heritage. The payoff justifies every ounce of the effort.